Hi, I'm Femi OK. Animal welfare organisations and activists are in London this week for the Illegal Wildlife Trade Conference, hoping to develop new strategies to combat a lucrative industry.
We speak with a few to hear how they're working to stop what they call a war on wildlife. I'm Malika Bilal and you're in the stream. Send us your comments on Twitter or in our YouTube live chat.
But first, let's take a look at this video from the World Wildlife Fund to get an idea of how widespread this issue is around the globe. It's good to have on the stream today some of the activists working to end wildlife crime. In London, Barnaby Phillips is a former Al Jazeera correspondent who is now the communications director for the Elephant Protection Initiative. In Chicago, Illinois, Angela Grimes is the interim CEO of Born Free USA. That's a non-profit organisation working to protect wildlife in their natural habitats. And in the studio, we have Johan Bergenas. He's Senior Director of Public Policy for Vulcan Inc., which focuses on issues related to the environment and global security. Hello, everybody. It's really good to have you. I'm going to start with Barnaby. The idea of conserving and conservation of elephants, this has been going on for decades and decades and decades. Obviously, there's still an issue. The way that the Elephant Protection Initiative is looking at this issue is slightly different. Tell us why.
Well, I think what's important about the Elephant Protection Initiative, the EPI, is that it is an African-led solution. It's a coalition of 19 African countries, and they're very, very different kinds of countries, to be honest. It's hard to generalize about them. They're Anglophone, Francophone, Lusophone. Some of them, like Botswana and Kenya, very well-established conservation countries, if you like, large elephant populations. Some of them, like Angola, Liberia, coming out of civil wars. Some of them, like Somalia, South Sudan, still in devastating wars. In the case of Somalia, perhaps really with virtually no elephants at all. So it's hard to generalize about them. But what's interesting is that these 19 governments, who ultimately are my masters, if you like, are coming together and are saying, you in wealthier parts of the world, you need to listen to us. These are African solutions to conserving elephants. We do very much want to conserve our wildlife. We want to protect our environment. We do need financial help from elsewhere, but you have to listen to our approaches and our priorities.
I think that's a great point, Barnaby. As the introduction noticed, I represent Paul Allen's technology organization, Vulcan, and much of our work begins with listening to the end user, walking with the rangers, listening to the rangers. What does their average day look like? What are their concerns? What are their problems? How do we make their lives easier? And integrating technology in their everyday life over trying to create something that is out of context, that might be working for a Western audience, but it's not going to be culturally or technologically appropriate for the folks on the ground.
And when you come at it from a point of looking at the interface between human and wildlife and looking at solutions that benefit both, that's where you can have success. When you're looking at the ground, when you're looking at humans, wildlife, and how the solutions come together to benefit all parties involved, that's where we're going to see long-term success.
Angela's right, but we shouldn't kid ourselves that the dilemmas are very acute. I'll give you an example. I was in Chad in Central Africa just last week, talking to a farmer in a very impoverished area whose crops had been completely destroyed by a herd of elephants. Now, there's no prospect of tourism in that area. There's no system of compensation set up for people whose livelihood has been destroyed by wildlife. And who am I to go and lecture that farmer? His name was Yusuf, about the morality of conserving these wonderful elephants so that our children and grandchildren can see them. And in Yusuf's dilemma, I suppose, I was really confronted not just with the practical problems of conserving elephants, which I dearly want to do, but also the morality of finding a solution that works for everybody on this increasingly crowded planet.
You know, when you talk about merging that duality, Barnaby, I wanted to bring up a conversation that I'm seeing online here. So this first tweet is from Kendi. She says, there is a war on people living around conservation areas. That war is led by, and this is her term here, conservationists who pretend to love animals more than the people on whose territory those conservation areas sit. So all of our guests here today seem to be talking about that idea, but then how do you merge it with the people who do want to promote conservation? I wanted to share this tweet here to pick up on that. This is from the World Wildlife Fund UK. And they share this. There's an elephant in London. Here is why. You can see the picture of this elephant that is roaming around the streets of London. And this is why. We had to bring an elephant into the city to be reminded of their struggle in the wild, thousands of miles away. And of course, the disclaimer is it's a hologram. It is not actually an elephant. But Barnaby, how do you merge those two conversations, wanting to educate conservationists, but also then having the input of people whose home communities include animals like this?
It's challenging. What we're seeing increasingly across Africa, and let's put this in context, there are 1.2 billion people in Africa. That's an awful lot more than when I was a small boy. And in 2050, there will be twice that amount. The human demographic growth in Africa is dramatic, and it's difficult to get away from that. Finding a solution that works for large, dangerous animals like elephants, like lions, and increasing numbers of people is very, very difficult. It works in some countries to an extent, countries like Botswana or Kenya. Fences work, tourism works, wildlife economies work, but is that going to work in a remote part of Chad or the Democratic Republic of Congo or South Sudan? Those are the difficult answers that we in the conservation world have to grapple with.
So, guess what I wanted to do in this show in particular was unpack how the business side of poaching actually works. And there's an Al Jazeera show called Techno, and they try to trace all the way back to Thailand to explore how animal trafficking routes actually operate. Have a look.
This is Bangkok, Thailand. Here at the world's largest flea market, weekend shoppers can find almost anything, including cage after cage full of exotic pets. For the right price, you can buy rare and even endangered species, a South American macaw, a monitor lizard, and African tortoises, to just name a few. Techno shot this video at the busy Chatuchak market. With the camera off, a shop owner offered to sell us what looked like a protected leaf monkey. This is why the World Wildlife Fund now recognizes this market as a hotspot for the illegal animal trade.
There you go, Johan. That video is a good transition to this tweet we got, because of course we started this conversation talking about elephants. Patricia here says, though, it is not only about elephants and rhinos. The illegal trade of birds is also a huge issue in every region of the world. Let's hashtag in wildlife crime. So that goes into the idea that there are other animals targeted. What other animals are you looking at, and should really the world be focused on?
That's right. No, this is a widespread illegal market. A little known animal, the pangolin, is the world's most illegally traded animal in the world, and I'm sure that most of your audience had never heard about it. The name of the game
now, and I'm going to show them a picture.
Wonderful.
Yes, it's a mammal with scales.
That's right.
Right.
And it's many people in Asia and elsewhere fancy its skin and want to pursue it. But the name of the game here is money. I've never met a person who has animosity towards an elephant or a rhino. There is a money-making industry here that people up and down the illicit supply chain have tapped into. And it's the same people who are smuggling drugs, arms, and humans around the world. And it's really up to the international community, as Barnaby pointed out, to working together, add resources and tools to go after this, so we don't leave one sector of the illicit market behind more highly recognized illegal behavior.
Johan, this is a crime scene.
Often we're using...
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Barnaby.
Sorry, Femi. I mean, often, of course, elephants are important to me, but often we use elephants or tigers or lions, what we call charismatic megafauna in the conservation world, as vehicles to conserve whole ecosystems. Because if you conserve the elephant, but then you conserve the forest and all the other animals, the pangolins and the insects and all the other little creatures, and that creates a better, we hope, more sustainable environment for all of us. So if you like, that they're the entry point to wider conservation.
So here's the point I think we miss this a lot. In responding to this crisis, we need to start looking at these animals and their parts as commodities, and then try to understand how they flow around the world, and then pick the choke points around the world in the supply chain to boost our resources. And there are three areas essentially. It's the supply chain, the natural parks, and you can add technology and park rangers and support from inside countries and outside. The UK just committed military personnel, soldiers, to go in Africa and help to train and equip. Then you have the supply chain, ports, shipping industry, transshipment points. We need to find the most important areas where these products transfer through and add resources. And then there's the demand side. In China and Southeast Asia more broadly, where these commodities have values that are of a cultural and other nature. Raising awareness, Vulcan has released a film about this called The Ivory Game. And that's one part of bringing stories and killing some of these ancient traditions, if you will.
Angela, I'm just looking at a list of retail market prices for various exotic animals. An African grey parrot can go at $2,000. A slow loris is $145. That's reasonably cheap. A gorilla, I have trouble thinking that somebody would order and buy a gorilla, $400,000. But you have seen this happen. People do buy wildlife as pets.
It's status. I lived for a little bit. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Adam.
You see this every day, all the time, and in fact, with the rise of the internet in the last decade or more, this has become even more of a problem. It's much easier to purchase a wild animal, regardless of the laws in your state or your country, through the internet and have that animal shipped to you. These animals are being torn from their mothers in the wild. They're being packed into shipping crates. They're being packed into toilet paper tubes, into drain pipes, and smuggled across borders to be able to be sold as pets. And yes, people do buy chimpanzees, gorillas, snakes, and other dangerous wild animals that not only pose a danger and a threat to the wild species, but also to the families and the people in the neighborhoods where they live.
I just have to show this gentleman here. He's from the UAE. He's got a famous Instagram account. Once you get on it, you can't stop looking at it. Yeah. This is him and one of his pet beasts going for a walk.
Well, and what's terribly remarkable about this and sad is that there are more tigers living captive in the United States than there are entirely in the wild. We're talking more than 5,000 just in the U.S. alone, compared to a wild population of about 3,000.
So when we talk about this issue, our community here wants us to remember that it is so many different animals that can be involved. This is Justin. He says this is a major issue across the globe. In many countries, songbirds are taken to hang in cages outside homes. The trade in exotic species, reptiles, amphibians, insects for pet trade is likely to outnumber trafficking of any other species for any other purpose. He goes on, though, Johan, to say in the UK, for example, exotic pets are imported from dubious breeders claiming they're captive bred. They're sold on social media sites used by groups of associates, and I'd argue it's beyond the reach of developing country law enforcement agencies. So then how, if that's true, do you tackle this pipeline?
So today in London, there were a couple of very important decisions made. We have had a task force going after and working with the shipping industry to try to close down some of these networks. Today, a financial task force was created that is going to look at suspicious transactions involving wildlife crime. So what I feel that we have seen over the last 5-6 years is actually a serious and security response that mirrors some of the other more highlighted crimes that we have seen over the last decades or so. So looking at the financial flows, being able to have banks alert authorities when they see suspicious behavior is going to be critical. And there's quite a bit of work being done also on the e-commerce, on social media sites. And so those type of partnerships, off and online, is going to be critical for taking on this issue.
I want to show you... Yeah, but go ahead, Banhi.
Oh, I was going to say, we should also talk about legislation, Femi, and
Sure.
particularly, wildlife, perhaps especially from Africa. The issue now is Asia and Chinese demand, and we've seen some very encouraging and welcome developments. China banned ivory at the beginning of this year. That's a fantastic achievement. The legislators in Hong Kong have set in process a motion that will ban ivory over the next couple of years. That's good news, but at the same time, a country like China, such is its overall demographic weight, that it only requires a small proportion of people to be breaking the law, and it has devastating impacts on wildlife in other parts of the world.
This discussion so far today begs the question that we've begun to address right now on what is the best way to then tackle illegal wildlife trading. Have a look at this video. It's posted to Twitter by the World Wildlife Fund.
Angela, I'm just thinking about the work of Born Free, where the idea of Born Free is that no wild animal should ever be anywhere other than in the wild. How much progress do you feel that you and other organisations are making right now in 2018 today?
I think we're all making progress, and the important thing to know is that we have to continue step by step, no matter how incremental. We have to keep working towards a world in which wildlife are left to live in the wild where they belong. And Barnaby and Johan have made excellent points as far as the need to stop the trafficking, to support legislation, to reinforce the people on the ground, the customs and border agents like Born Free is doing in West Africa, where we are helping train wildlife enforcement agents. We're working directly with West African governments to be able to help educate and give them the tools and resources so that when they are able to identify the species that are illegally traded and stop it at their borders before they get to countries like the United States or China to feed the demand.
And Johan, you were talking earlier about tools and technology to help people down on the ground. What did you mean by that? Can you explain that a little bit more?
So Vulcan's point of view and the broader point of view, I think, is that the technologies that is required to fix this problem already exist or is being developed. Everything from drones to radars to sensors to software. And getting it into the field and connecting it with the rangers, with the commander, is really where the rubber hits the road. So we've spent a tremendous amount of time over the last 4 or 5 years understanding the users and what they need. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Throughout 12 sites now in Africa, parks that we are active in, what we saw was this abundance of data that was floating around in Excel spreadsheets, in the minds of the rangers, in tucked away cabinets. We wanted to provide a tool that can bring the patrol route of a ranger, where the elephants are, where suspicious behaviors are, integrating sensor, maybe a drone's feed, into a software for an operational picture. That's called Earth Ranger. We're very proud to be in 12 parks and I think 8 countries now, helping the rangers.
I will let you continue your advert only because it's saving elephants.
Exactly.
I feel like they should have music and a 30-second bumper.
That's the great part of working for and with Paul Allen, the great philanthropist.
You're a good salesperson.
I'm glad that you mentioned the rangers, though, because we got this tweet from Simon Hedges. He says, rangers who risk their lives protecting wildlife must be properly equipped, trained, and managed. They must be given insurance, and their families must be looked after if they are injured or killed. And that's one thing that I think many people don't often think of. But Simon goes on to say that public-private partnerships should also be used to manage protected areas, working with governments and local people like those successfully deployed by African parks. He gives one example there. But Barnaby, I'm wondering what your take is on this.
Yeah, I fully endorse the work. African Parks, for our viewers, if they don't know, they're essentially a non-profit organization who, if you like, specialize in rescuing failing national parks in Africa, often in quite difficult countries like Chad, countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Benin, sort of a place a little bit out of the way, and they have a very good track record. Yes, rangers, the thin green line, as we call them, they are the heroes. Hundreds have been killed over the past decade across Africa. But like guests have said, any successful approach has to be holistic. Of course, we need to help rangers. We've got to stop poaching on the ground. We need better legislation, better law enforcement, new laws in Asia. And of course, we need to change public opinion in consumer countries as well. So it's a PR battle, it's a military battle, it's all of those things at the same time.
And one thing that I would add.
Yes, go ahead, Angela, go ahead.
One thing I would add to that's another part of the solution, is that law enforcement needs a place to call on, or a group to call on, when they confiscate wild animals. So these wild animals are not just exiting the country in parts and pieces for trade, but they are leaving as whole live wild animals. And when they are confiscated, law enforcement needs a place to go. For example, Born Free's sanctuary in Sesikote outside Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, the cheetah babies that you just put up on the screen a couple of minutes ago, those animals were confiscated and rescued on the border of Somalia. They're now living at our sanctuary.
Ooh,
they're alive today.
Hold on a minute. I've got the sanctuary because it was so amazing. Let me just show here. Monkeys diving into the water at the Born Free USA Primate Sanctuary. Just for those
that is our
moments.
primate sanctuary in South Texas here in the United States, and those animals have been rescued from the pet trade and other abusive and neglectful situations.
Barnaby, I was on your Facebook page a little bit earlier on. I'm getting away from the cute monkeys, but you shared this picture on your Facebook, and it was an elephant. And what is it like to be in the wild and then to see a wild elephant and be that close?
That was an amazing experience. That was a picture we took in Chad just last week, and it was very different, say, to being in a more conventional safari in a vehicle. We were on foot. Those elephants are very, very nervous, extremely heavily poached in southern Chad. No elephants left with large tusks at all. It's quite tragic to see the way in which the elephants are changing. The gene pattern is changing across many elephant populations in Africa, and those elephants got sight of us and disappeared into the bush very, very quickly. But to be on foot and to hear the rumble of elephants' stomachs and the crashing of branches ahead of you is a very extraordinary experience, and an experience which I pray dearly, obviously, that my children and grandchildren are lucky to have, and this will still be possible in 50 or 80 years' time.
Can I add a story to that?
Yes, it's going to be a 20-second story, Johan, but I trust you can do it.
I've had the fortune to sit at the rhino waterhole in the southern part of Kenya.
Yes.
To see the rhinos approach the waterhole. They are very scared animals. And always that you build that trust. They know you're there. They come up. They start to interact with you. And it's a very, very wonderful piece of experience I've had.
Okay, now I'm having FOMO, but we do have wild cockroaches in the studio, so you're not missing out entirely. Malika, where did you want to take us?
Well, it's to ensure that future generations can have those experiences that Barnaby and Johan shared. Kate on conservation shares this. A big step would be to increase the level of public education and media coverage to match that seen with the sale of illegal drugs and weapons, to lobby government ministers to debate it as often and as publicly, and to teach children in schools that ivory is worthless as an ornament. Remy.
One more tweet to show you, and this is on Nick Clark, who is Al Jazeera's environmental editor. He's out there at the Illegal Wildlife Trade Conference. He's reporting. You can see him here talking to the African Wildlife Foundation president. If you enjoyed this program, there'll be much more reporting on Al Jazeera, so don't go away. In the meantime, Barnaby, Angela, Johan, thank you so much for being on the show today. Malika and I will see you always online on Twitter at AJStream. Thanks for watching. See you next time.